The Alpha King entered Bennet Manor dressed as a servant, and within minutes, the woman he had come to judge stepped into the snow to protect him. A silver tray lay scattered across the courtyard, cups and spoons shining beneath the lanterns. Ethan Blackwood stood beside it in a rough wool coat, his head lowered, his royal bearing hidden beneath the careful posture of a nervous newcomer. He had dropped the tray on purpose. It was a simple test, the kind that revealed more than polished smiles ever could. The head steward raised his voice. New servants who cannot follow instructions do not remain here long. Before Ethan could answer, Clara Bennet moved between them. Snow clung to her dark dress and pale hair, and the sleeves at her wrists had been mended so many times that the original stitching was almost gone. "It was my fault," she said. Her voice was quiet but it did not shake. "I told him the west corridor was clear. I should have shown him the proper route." Ethan studied her from beneath lowered lashes. He had expected Madison Bennet, the celebrated daughter of the house, to be watching. Instead, Madison stood beneath the covered porch with her mother, warm in a fur-lined cloak, amusement resting in her eyes. 3 days earlier, the royal seers had declared that Ethan's future mate would be found within House Bennet. The family had responded with perfect speed. Letters arrived praising Madison's grace, education, and kindness. Portraits followed. So did carefully written statements from servants describing her generosity. Ethan trusted none of it. He had ordered Daniel Reed to bring the official royal convoy 2 days later, allowing everyone at Bennet Manor to believe the king was still traveling north. Ethan had come ahead alone under the name Eli Brooks because crowns made people perform, while servants were shown the truth. "You accept responsibility?" the steward asked Clara. "Yes, sir." "Then you will remain outside until the midnight bell." A murmur passed through the household staff. Clara only nodded. "Thank you, sir." The words held no gratitude, only discipline. She knelt and began gathering the silver pieces with bare hands. Ethan crouched beside her. "Why would you do that?" he asked under his breath. "Because you are new. That does not make the mistake yours." Her eyes flicked toward the porch, then back to the tray. "In this house, blame is rarely given to the person who deserves it." One spoon slipped from her cold fingers. Ethan caught it before it touched the snow. For a moment their hands nearly met. Something in his chest tightened, not quite recognition, but close enough to unsettle him. Clara quickly looked away. "Go inside before they decide you are troublesome." "And leave you here? I know how to survive the cold." The way she said it told him she had survived far worse. She removed a pair of worn gloves from her pocket and pressed them into his hands. "Take these. They are yours." "Not tonight." Then she stepped into the center of the courtyard and faced the falling snow alone. Ethan remained beneath the archway, holding the gloves as though they were something precious. He had come to discover whether Madison Bennet deserved a throne. Yet as Clara accepted punishment for a man she believed had nothing to offer her, a different possibility took root in his mind. Perhaps House Bennet had not lied about the prophecy. Perhaps they had only pointed him toward the wrong woman. The midnight bell had not yet sounded when Ethan returned to the servants' courtyard with a folded blanket over one arm and a cup of hot broth concealed beneath it. Clara still stood where the steward had left her, snow gathering along her shoulders and in the pale strands of hair near her face. She did not pace or complain. She simply watched the dark windows of Bennet Manor with the stillness of someone who had learned that resistance was safest when hidden. Ethan stepped beneath the lantern light. "You should come inside." Clara turned sharply. "You should not be here." "Neither should you. That has never mattered to them." Her voice remained calm, but exhaustion softened it. Ethan held out the blanket. She hesitated before taking it, as though kindness in this house usually arrived with a condition. "The steward will notice," she whispered. "Then tell him I stole it. He would dismiss you. Perhaps I am a terrible servant." A faint smile touched her mouth and vanished so quickly that Ethan almost missed it. She wrapped the blanket around herself, but when he offered the broth, she pushed it back toward him. "Give that to Samuel." "Who is Samuel?" "The kitchen boy. He has been coughing all evening." Clara glanced toward the lower windows. "He sleeps beside the pantry because Mrs. Bennet says the attic room is too good for him." Ethan studied her. Her lips had lost their color, Yet her first thought was for someone else. And you do not need it? Samuel needs it more. 3 days earlier, Ethan had read every report House Bennet had sent to the palace. Each page praised Madison Bennet as gracious, charitable, and beloved by those beneath her station. Clara's name had appeared only once, buried in an old household register. Clara Evelyn Bennet, daughter of Thomas Bennet, deceased. Beside it, someone had drawn a dark line and written removed from family consideration. There was no marriage record, no transfer, and no explanation. Ethan had assumed she lived elsewhere. Now he understood. She had been erased without ever leaving. Why do they call you Clara Bennet? He asked. Her body went still. Who told you that name? I heard one of the older maids. Clara looked toward the windows again. You should forget it. Is Bennet not your family? Blood and family are not always the same thing. There was no anger in her answer, only a sorrow worn smooth by repetition. Before Ethan could ask more, the west door opened. Madison stepped onto the covered porch in a silver evening gown, untouched by the cold. Her golden hair was perfectly arranged, and her smile held no warmth. Clara, she called. My mother wants the blue room prepared before sunrise. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, then to the blanket around Clara's shoulders. And you, new servant, return to the kitchen. Clara handed the blanket back at once. Yes, Miss Madison. As she passed Ethan, she whispered, do not let them notice you asking questions. Then she disappeared inside. Madison watched her go before turning to him. She tells stories when she wants sympathy. Ethan lowered his head. I understand. I doubt that. She stepped closer. Clara was taken in out of charity. She repaid that kindness with ingratitude, envy, and a talent for making servants pity her. Ethan kept his expression blank, though every word sharpened his suspicion. You would be wise not to believe anything she says. Yes, Miss Bennet. Madison returned inside, leaving the door open behind her. Ethan looked down at the worn gloves Clara had given him. The royal reports had praised Madison for honesty. Clara had warned him without asking for trust, protection, or reward. One of them had built her life on a lie. By sunrise, Ethan intended to learn why Clara Bennet had been erased from her own family. By sunrise, the blue room smelled of beeswax, pine soap, and roses brought from the southern valleys. Clara had worked through the night, polishing the silver mirror, warming the fireplace, and arranging fresh linens before Madison returned from breakfast. Ethan carried a stack of folded towels behind her, deliberately moving with the uncertain rhythm of a new servant. He had spent years studying treaties, rival pacts, and the ambitions of powerful men, yet Clara remained harder to understand than any royal council. She never complained. She never asked for praise. She simply noticed what others needed before they spoke. The folded edges must face the window, she told him, adjusting the top towel. Madison dislikes uneven lines. Does Madison notice everything? Ethan asked. Only mistakes. Clara stepped back to inspect the room. Shadows rested beneath her eyes, but her hands remained careful. A soft crash sounded in the hallway. Clara reached the door before Ethan did. Samuel stood beside a broken porcelain vase, his face pale with fear. Water spread across the polished floor, carrying white rose petals toward the stairs. I was bringing flowers, he whispered. The rug caught my shoe. Footsteps approached from the lower hall. Clara immediately placed the empty flower basket in his hands. Go to the pantry. But Miss Clara, it was me. Samuel. Her voice stayed gentle, though urgency sharpened it. Use the back stairs. The boy hesitated, then hurried away. Just as Victoria Bennet entered the corridor, her dark green dress swept over the floor, and her expression hardened when she saw the shattered vase. That belonged to my grandmother. Clara lowered her head. I am sorry, Mrs. Bennet. I knocked it over while preparing the room. Ethan watched from the doorway. He had seen Samuel beside the vase. Clara knew he had seen. Still, she accepted the blame without looking toward him for rescue. Victoria's gaze moved over the broken porcelain. You will replace it from your wages. Clara became still for half a second. Yes, Mrs. Bennet. And you will not attend the household meal today. Yes, Mrs. Bennet. Victoria turned to Ethan. Why are you standing there? I was assigned to assist her. Then learn from her carelessness, not her manners. She walked away without another glance. Silence settled over the corridor. Clara knelt and began gathering the pieces into her apron. Ethan crouched beside her. You did not break it. Lower your voice. You are losing food and wages for something Samuel did. Samuel is 12 years old. If they dismiss him, he has nowhere to go. And you do. She paused, a white rose petal resting against her palm. I know how to survive here. Ethan took the broken pieces from her before she could protest. Surviving is not the same as living. Clara looked at him then, truly looked, as though the words had reached a place she kept hidden. People like us do not always get to choose the difference. A servant entered carrying a silver tray, and announced that Madison wanted the new man in the conservatory. Clara's expression changed at once. Do not argue with her, she whispered. Do not promise anything. And if she asks what you have seen in this house, say nothing. Ethan rose slowly. Why? Clara glanced toward the staircase where Samuel had disappeared. Because kindness is not what they fear most here. They fear witnesses. The conservatory was warm enough to make the snow beyond its glass walls seem like another world. Pale sunlight filtered through climbing ivy and fell across tables crowded with winter roses. Madison stood beside a silver tea service in a powder blue dress, every detail arranged with the precision of a royal portrait. Close the door, she told Ethan. He obeyed, lowering his shoulders and keeping his expression carefully blank. Clara has been speaking to you. It was not a question. She has shown me my duties. Madison lifted her teacup. Clara enjoys making herself useful. It helps her forget what she is. Ethan looked down at the tray before him. And what is that, Miss Bennet? A dependent. A failed omega. Someone my family has been generous enough to shelter. The lie came too easily. Ethan had studied the old records. Clara's father had owned 1/3 of the Bennet estate before his death. You will tell me what she says, Madison continued. Where she goes. Who she speaks to. Especially after dark. Ethan allowed a nervous pause. Why would she go anywhere after dark? Madison's smile remained pleasant, but her eyes sharpened. Because frightened people often make foolish plans. Before he could answer, the conservatory door opened. Clara entered carrying a basket of fresh towels. She stopped when she saw them together, and alarm crossed her face before she lowered her gaze. I did not mean to interrupt. You did, Madison replied. Set those down. Clara moved toward the table. One towel slipped from the basket and brushed a crystal vase. Ethan caught it before it tipped. His hand moved with the speed and control of a trained swordsman. Clara noticed. Her gaze dropped to the calluses across his palm, then to the way he returned the vase without a tremor. Madison noticed only the saved crystal. At least one of you is capable, she said. The Eastern guest rooms must be ready by evening. The royal party may arrive tomorrow instead of the following day. Clara's face lost color. Why has the schedule changed? That is not your concern. A low sound came from outside the glass wall. 2 trained wolves from the estate kennels had slipped free from their handler and crossed the snowy lawn. They stopped near the conservatory doors. The moment they saw Ethan, both lowered their heads. Recognition moved through him like a warning. Clara stared through the glass, then slowly looked at him. They never do. That, she whispered. Madison laughed. They are unsettled by the weather. Ethan forced himself to relax. Animals are unpredictable. Clara's eyes remained on him. No. People are. Madison left with the tea tray and ordered Clara to follow. Clara waited until the door closed behind her. You are not who you say you are. Ethan met her gaze. What makes you think that? Your hands belong to a fighter. You speak like someone educated. Those wolves bowed when they saw you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. And yesterday, when Madison raised her hand, your eyes changed. Ethan said nothing. Clara's fear was not for herself. It was for him. Whatever strength you are hiding, keep it hidden, she warned. People who notice too much in this house disappear before sunrise. Disappear where? Her gaze shifted toward the dark line of trees beyond the glass. No one knows. They simply stop coming back. That evening, Ethan found Clara in the old linen room beneath the eastern staircase, sorting torn sheets by candlelight while Bennet Manor prepared for the royal arrival. The room was narrow and cold, its shelves bending beneath years of forgotten cloth. Clara looked up when he entered, then immediately checked the hallway behind him. "You should not be here. You say that often. Because you keep appearing where questions are dangerous." Ethan closed the door and placed a small leather pouch on the table. The quiet weight of coins sounded louder than it should have. Beside it, he set 2 travel papers bearing false names and a route north toward Silverpine territory. Clara stared at them without touching either. "What is this?" "A way out." Ethan kept his voice low. "A supply wagon leaves before dawn. The driver believes the royal convoy is still a day away. We could be 10 miles from here before anyone notices." Her eyes lifted to his. You warned me that people who notice too much disappear. I have no intention of waiting for that to happen." He expected suspicion, perhaps relief. Instead, Clara stepped back as though the offer itself frightened her. "Take the papers and go. I am not leaving you here. You barely know me. I know enough to understand that this house is not shelter." Clara looked toward the candle, its flame trembling in the draft. "No. You know what I allowed you to see." Ethan moved the pouch closer. "Then show me the rest." For several seconds she said nothing. Above them, servants polished silver and carried flowers through the halls, every sound part of the performance being prepared for a king who was already inside. At last, Clara crossed the room and pulled a loose board from the lowest shelf. Behind it lay a folded ledger wrapped in gray cloth. She placed it before him. Inside were names, dozens of them. Kitchen workers, stable hands, laundresses, widows, and young omegas sent from neighboring packs. Beside each name, Clara had written a date, an unpaid wage, and a careful note. Papers withheld. Travel denied. Family threatened. Debt increased without cause. Ethan read the first page, then the second. His expression hardened. Who are these people? The ones they keep here because they believe no one important will ever come looking for them. Clara touched one name near the bottom. Eleanor Price has a sister in the Western Valley. She wrote 12 letters. None were sent. Her finger moved to another. Thomas Hale was promised wages for 3 years. They told him he owes more now than when he arrived. And Samuel? His father died in the winter mines. The family claimed the boy inherited the debt. Ethan closed the ledger slowly. This is unlawful. Laws only matter when someone powerful chooses to enforce them. Then bring this with us. Clara shook her head. If I disappear, they will destroy the records and move everyone before anyone can help. You cannot save them alone. I know. Her voice weakened for the first time, but she steadied it. That is why I stayed. Ethan had entered Bennet Manor believing he was testing whether Clara deserved a place beside the throne. Now, surrounded by the name she had protected in secret, he felt the shame of that thought. She had no title, no guard, and no promise of rescue, yet she had built a case for people the kingdom had failed to see. "Why trust me with this?" he asked. Clara looked at the worn gloves still tucked into his coat. "Because you carried broth to Samuel. Because you listened before you judged. And because the official convoy arrives tomorrow, which means I have run out of time." Ethan's attention sharpened. Time for what? She wrapped the ledger again and hid it behind the board. The banquet. Music began in the great hall above them. Clara looked toward the ceiling, fear passing across her face. When the Alpha King arrives, House Bennet plans to make certain he never leaves as the same man. The music above them faded behind the stone walls as Clara led Ethan through a narrow passage beneath the manor chapel. She carried one candle and kept her steps light, pausing whenever the floorboards overhead creaked. At the end of the passage stood an iron door hidden behind a faded tapestry. Clara removed a small key from the hem of her sleeve. "Where did you get that?" Ethan whispered. "I pressed the original into candle wax and had a copy made." "You have been planning this for a long time. Long enough to know no one was coming to help." The lock opened with a soft click. Beyond it, the cellar stretched beneath the eastern wing, lined with barrels, crates, and bottles prepared for the royal banquet. The air smelled of damp wood, old stone, and something bitter beneath the sweetness of the wine. Ethan felt his wolf stir in warning. Clara moved to a table where 14 dark bottles stood apart from the others. Each carried the royal seal of Silverpine. "These are meant for the king's table tomorrow night," she said. Ethan lifted one toward the candle. The wax looked perfect, but a faint violet line circled the neck. "Nightshade," he said. Clara turned sharply. "You recognize it? I have seen it used before." He set the bottle down with controlled care. Enough to weaken an alpha, cloud his judgment, and make him appear unstable before witnesses. "That is the plan." Clara reached beneath the table and brought out a small silver pendant. "Madison wears one exactly like this. The powder inside is the antidote." Ethan's expression hardened. "She intends to weaken the king, then appear to calm him." "In front of the court," Clara said. "Richard will claim the king's condition is dangerous and demand a royal bond with Madison as the price of protecting the throne from scandal." The pieces settled into place. It was not only an assassination attempt. It was a claim on the crown. Ethan looked at the bottles. "How did you identify them?" Clara opened her palm. A faint purple stain marked her fingertips. "My mother's family could sense certain poisons through touch. Nightshade feels like winter under the skin." Ethan caught her wrist before she reached for another bottle. Her hand was cold. "You tested all 14. Only the seals and the glass. And each test weakened you." Clara looked away. "Repeated contact dulls my wolf and masks my scent. I replaced 9 bottles before they changed the locks." Ethan finally understood the exhaustion beneath her eyes, the faintness of her Omega presence, and the way the bond between them had remained hidden. "You should have stopped. Then 5 poison bottles would have become 14. There had to be another way. Not for someone without authority." Her answer held no self-pity, only fact. Ethan stepped closer. "Why risk this for a king you have never met?" Clara met his gaze. "Because if he falls here, every northern pack will fight over what comes next. Servants will suffer first. Villages will suffer next. Children like Samuel will pay for the ambitions of men like Richard Bennett." Ethan had heard speeches about loyalty from generals and nobles. None had carried the quiet truth in her voice. Before he could answer, footsteps sounded in the passage. Clara extinguished the candle. Darkness swallowed the cellar. A key turned in the outer lock. Then Madison's voice drifted through the door, soft and satisfied. "The altered wax led us straight to her." Clara's fingers found Ethan's hand in the blackness. "They know," she whispered. "And this time they came prepared." The door opened and a narrow blade of lantern light crossed the cellar floor. Clara tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. Madison entered first, followed by Lord Richard Bennett and 2 household guards. Her expression held the satisfaction of someone whose trap had finally closed. "The altered wax led us straight to her," she said. Richard lifted the lantern and studied the bottles on the table. 9 replaced. 5 untouched. Clara stepped in front of Ethan before anyone could move closer. "He followed me. He does not know anything." Madison gave a soft laugh. "Still protecting servants. Even now." Richard's gaze settled on Ethan. "And who are you really, Eli Brooks?" Ethan lowered his head, keeping his voice controlled. "A servant who was asked to carry a crate. A servant who asks too many questions," Madison replied. One of the guards placed a gray-wrapped ledger on the table. Clara's breath caught. Richard opened it and turned several pages. "You should have chosen a better hiding place." Clara stared at him. "You searched the linen room." Madison saw candle wax beneath your fingernails and noticed that the chapel key had been moved. His smile was cold and measured. "You were never as invisible as you believed." Ethan felt anger rise, but he forced it down. If he revealed himself now, Richard could destroy records, warn his allies, and claim that Clara had invented everything. Daniel and the royal guard were still hours away. He needed witnesses. He needed the banquet. "These people are not property," Clara said, looking at the names in the ledger. "You withheld their wages, kept their travel papers, and increased debts that never existed." Richard closed the book. "We gave them work. You gave them fear." For one brief moment, Clara stood taller, and Ethan saw the courage she had hidden beneath years of obedience. Richard saw it too. "Take her upstairs." Ethan stepped forward. She has done nothing wrong. Every eye turned toward him. He immediately softened his posture, but not before Madison noticed the authority in his voice. Then perhaps you helped her. Clara shook her head. He did not. You were found together. Because I asked him to carry supplies. Madison moved closer. Tomorrow, you will both explain yourselves before the royal guests. Clara looked at Ethan, and the warning in her eyes was clear. Do not reveal yourself. Not yet. He understood. So he allowed the guards to escort them from the cellar. Clara was confined to a small room. Beside the great hall, Ethan was returned to the servants' quarters under watch. The next day passed beneath constant supervision. By late afternoon, carriages rolled through the gates beneath silver pine banners. Daniel Reed led the official convoy exactly as planned, allowing Bennett Manor to believe the Alpha King had arrived unseen among his own retinue. Music filled the halls. Candles turned the windows gold against the snow. House Bennett dressed itself in elegance while hiding its crimes beneath polished silver. Just before the banquet, Ethan was summoned to the great hall. Clara stood before the assembled guests in a plain gray dress, her hands bound with white ceremonial ribbon. The poisoned bottles had been arranged on a table behind her. Lord Richard addressed the room. We have uncovered a plot against the Alpha King. Madison placed Clara's ledger beside the wine. The traitor is one of our own. Clara searched the crowd until she found Ethan among the servants. She did not ask for rescue. She only looked at the wine in his hands and whispered across the silence. Whatever happens, do not let the king drink. The great hall became so quiet that Clara could hear the fire settle in the stone hearth. Every noble eye rested on her, yet she kept watching Ethan among the servants. Lord Richard lifted one of the sealed bottles from the table. This was found among her belongings, he announced. She intended to poison His Majesty before the royal bond could be secured. Clara shook her head. It came from your cellar. A convenient accusation, Madison said, stepping beside him in a silver gown. Around her neck hung the pendant containing the antidote. She has always resented this family. She knew the king was coming to choose his future Luna, and she could not bear to remain invisible. A murmur moved through the guests. Ethan set the wine tray down. Then test the bottle, he said. Richard turned toward him with open contempt. Servants do not address this court. Neither should liars. The words carried farther than Ethan intended, and the room changed. Clara stared at him, fear widening her gray eyes. Richard motioned toward the household guards. Remove him. Before anyone reached Ethan, the great doors opened. Cold air swept through the hall, followed by the measured sound of armored boots. Daniel Reed entered beneath the silver pine banner with the royal guard behind him. Every weapon remained sheathed. Every soldier stopped in perfect formation. Daniel crossed the room, carrying a dark silver mantle in both hands. Then he bowed. Your Majesty. The title struck the hall like thunder. Ethan straightened, and the careful uncertainty vanished from his posture. Daniel fastened the royal mantle across his shoulders, then placed the blackwood signet ring into his hand. One by one, the royal guards knelt. The assembled guests followed until only the Bennett family and Clara remained standing. Madison stared at Ethan as though the floor had shifted beneath her. Eli, she whispered. Ethan Blackwood, he said, his voice calm and unmistakable. Alpha King of Silverpine. Richard recovered first. Your Majesty, this is a misunderstanding. We were protecting you. By placing nightshade in my wine? Ethan asked. By preparing an antidote for Madison so she could appear to calm me before the court? By planning to declare me unstable and demand a royal bond as the price of protecting the throne from scandal? Madison's hand flew to the pendant at her throat. Daniel stepped forward. Before entering this hall, the royal guard searched the eastern offices. We found the original debt ledgers, withheld travel papers, altered wage records, and written orders concerning the poisoned wine. He placed the documents beside Clara's ledger. Every account matches hers. Ethan looked toward the servants gathered near the walls. The people behind those names are not debtors. They are witnesses. Richard's face hardened. You would trust the word of an Omega over a noble house? Ethan met his gaze. I trusted what I saw when you believed no king was watching. He turned to Clara. She fed a sick child, accepted blame for those with less power, protected workers no one else would defend, and weakened herself stopping a crime meant for me. Even while accused, her first concern was that I not drink. Madison's voice broke. But I was chosen. You were presented, Ethan replied. That is not the same thing. He crossed the hall and untied the white ribbon from Clara's hands. She looked at him with hurt, disbelief, and the beginning of anger. You were testing me, she said. Shame passed across his face. At first. He faced the room again. I came here to judge who was worthy to stand beside a king. Then he looked back at Clara. I discovered the better question was whether the king was worthy to stand beside her. As his hand released the last ribbon, their fingers touched. On the ceremonial table behind them, the ancient moonstone awakened and filled the hall with silver light. The moonstone brightened until silver light spilled across the great hall and gathered around Clara like dawn. A soft gasp moved through the room. Ethan felt the bond before anyone spoke, warm and unmistakable, rising between them with the quiet certainty of truth. Clara looked down at the light circling her hands, then back at him. I do not understand. Daniel stepped closer to the ceremonial table. The moonstone answers only to the true royal bond. Madison's face crumpled. Lord Richard said nothing. For the first time, House Bennet had no lie prepared. Ethan turned to the royal guard. Release every worker whose papers were withheld. Restore every unpaid wage. Place this estate under royal review until each record is examined. Then he faced Clara. The Bennet property that belonged to your father will be returned to you. Clara stared at him, overwhelmed. You knew. I found your name in the old register. I did not know why it had been erased. Now you do. Her voice held no triumph, only exhaustion. Ethan stepped closer, but he did not touch her. The bond may have chosen us, but I will not use it to command you. The hall became still again. Everyone expected a royal claim. Instead, Ethan lowered himself to one knee. Clara Bennet, I deceived you. I watched you, judged you, and entered your life wearing a false name. You owe me nothing. Not loyalty. Not forgiveness. Not love. Her eyes filled, though her posture remained steady. Then why are you kneeling? Because a crown does not place me above. The truth. You protected people when no reward was waiting. You protected me before you knew who I was. I want the chance to know you without disguise, and for you to know me without fear. Clara looked toward Samuel and the servants gathered near the wall. They were no longer hiding their faces. Eleanor Price held her return travel papers against her heart. Thomas Hale stood beside her with tears in his eyes. The ledger Clara had guarded in secret now rested beside the royal seal. She looked back at Ethan. I will not choose a throne. His expression softened. I would not ask you to. Clara extended her hand. I will choose the man who carried broth to a sick child, who listened when no one else did, and who finally understood that power means protecting those who cannot demand protection. Ethan took her hand and rose. The moonstone glowed once more, not like a command but like a promise. Together they walked toward the open doors. Ethan placed his royal cloak around Clara's shoulders, yet she stepped ahead of him into the snow, free to choose her own path. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden beneath every crown and every disguise. Character is revealed in the way we treat people who seem unable to reward us. Clara had no title when she chose compassion, and Ethan had no visible power when she chose to protect him. True strength was never in rank, wealth, or fear. It was in gentleness, courage, and the willingness to make things right. In my view, Ethan became worthy of Clara only when he stopped testing her and began holding himself accountable. Do you believe Clara should have forgiven him so quickly, or should he have worked longer to earn her trust? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories where kindness uncovers the truth and love gives the forgotten a voice. Silver light flowed from the moonstone and crossed the great hall like quiet dawn. It circled Clara and Ethan, then settled between them in a glowing thread that no one could deny. A collective breath moved through the room. Daniel Reed looked toward the stone. It responds only when the Alpha King stands before his true mate. Clara stared at the light around her. Fingers then at Ethan. So that was the purpose of all this? No, he said immediately. The bond explains what drew me here. It does not excuse what I did after I arrived. He turned to Daniel. Return every withheld travel paper. Pay every missing wage from the Bennett estate. Samuel's inherited debt is cancelled, along with every false debt recorded in those ledgers. Eleanor Price covered her mouth as a guard placed her papers into her hands. Thomas Hale lowered his head, overcome. Ethan continued. Clara's lawful share of this property will be restored. Until the royal court completes its investigation, the estate will remain under Silverpine protection. Lord Richard tried to speak, but Daniel calmly escorted the Bennett family from the center of the hall. No one applauded. Justice did not need celebration to be real. When the room had settled, Ethan faced Clara again. He removed the royal mantle from his shoulders and placed it over a nearby chair rather than around her. Then the most powerful man in the Northern Territories lowered himself to one knee. Clara Bennett, I entered your home under a false name. I watched you without your consent, judged your choices, and allowed you to trust a man who did not fully exist. Her eyes shone, but her voice remained steady. You believed you had the right to test me because you were king. I did. Shame did not weaken his answer. It made it honest. I was wrong. Ethan looked at the moonstone. This bond gives me no ownership over you. You owe me no loyalty, no forgiveness, and no love. If you ask me to leave tonight, I will. Clara studied the man before her. She remembered Eli carrying broth to Samuel, gathering broken porcelain beside her, and listening when everyone else had demanded silence. But she also remembered every question he had asked while hiding the truth. I am not choosing a crown, she said. And I am not promising forgiveness tonight. Ethan bowed his head. I understand. Trust is not restored by one apology, even when it is spoken on one knee. Then I will earn it standing beside you, not above you. Clara let the silence test him now. At last she extended her hand. I will choose the chance to know the man who finally told me the truth. Ethan took her hand gently and rose. He understood that it was not a claim. It was a beginning. Together they walked toward the open doors, where clean snow covered the road beyond Bennett Manor. Clara stepped outside first, not as a servant, not as a future Luna, but as a woman free to decide who she would become. Ethan followed one pace behind. Perhaps the deepest lesson in their story is that kindness reveals character, but accountability proves it. Clara showed courage when no reward was waiting, while Ethan became worthy of her only after he surrendered the belief that power gave him the right to judge her. Destiny may bring two people together, but it cannot create trust for them. Trust must be earned through honesty, patience, and respect. Do you believe Clara was right to give Ethan a chance, or should she have walked away until he had proven himself over time? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe true strength can be gentle, subscribe for more stories where the forgotten find their voice and love begins with dignity.
All stories are fictional and created for entertainment, inspiration, and reflection. Through Alpha King and Omega Fantasy Romance, this channel hopes to remind viewers of courage, kindness, self-worth, healing, and the belief that wounded hearts deserve love, respect, and a second chance. Any resemblance to people or events is coincidental.